What's up, everyone? Welcome to this virtual studio practice session for the Why Playing High Notes Isn't Your Job YouTube lesson about how we play lead trombone. Today, we're going to unpack some of the concepts we talked about in that lesson and actually practice through them. As always, I'd really encourage you to also make sure you have the handout available that accompanies this practice session. As we move through these exercises, it's nice to just have that information right there in front of you on the music stand. Now, as the title alludes to, and as I mentioned a number of times in the YouTube lesson, when we're playing lead, our primary concern should not really be about like, oh, am I going to be able to play all these high notes? And we just got to be careful that we don't sort of like over-invest in that practice time. But today we are going to talk about some ways we can build our upper register. We're not going to delve super deep into this, but we are going to take a couple just practical approaches that lots of different brass players use that help us to improve this range. Yes, we've got to work on it. Yes, we've got to develop those foundations. We just want to make sure that it is not the only thing we think about, especially from a musical standpoint when we're trying to play lead trombone. All right, to start with, as any sort of discussion of sort of like fundamentals of brass playing does, we are going to start with some breathing exercises. Now, we're just going to do two quick ones. This is not the main focus of today's lesson. I might post a breathing lesson at some point, but not the main focus today, but we do want to think about how it connects to our upper register. There's a lot of information we could think about with our air, but generally speaking, particularly when we are in the upper register, we want to make sure that our air is focused, it's energetic. We do need to use a fair amount of air, but I would caution you against using too much. You'd be surprised, actually. A lot of times you can find a little bit better results if you actually back the air off a little bit in the upper register, so you don't end up forcing. As you're in the upper register, in your aperture, the little opening between your lips becomes more and more focused. If you just keep trying to cram the same amount of air through that opening, you're not going to get the results you want. So it's all about the right type of air in the right situation. Really not a more air or less air approach. It's all about the correct type of air. So our first breathing exercise is going to be a classic. We're going to take 1 count breath in, and then we're going to breathe out for 8, 12, and 16 counts. This is a pretty meat and potatoes exercise, something that hopefully all of us have practiced in some sort of variation. What we're really trying to think about here is sort of pacing our air and controlling the air on the exhale. Usually we're playing for kind of 8 count phrases, 12 count phrases, longer chunks of air. So we want to make sure we're able to keep that steady, relaxed airstream over those longer counts without feeling like we're forcing the air from our diaphragm. Now, over these 8, 12, and 16 counts, I want you to think about, am I emptying my tank basically all the way? You don't have to feel like you're forcing. It doesn't have to be like literally from 100% to 0%, but you want to feel mostly empty by the time you get to the end of count 8. You don't want to sort of be just like letting that air go. You really want to try to empty out as much as you can. So let's give this a try. I'm going to throw a metronome on. I like to use a metronome somewhere between like 60 to 80 for most breathing exercises. I'm going to set it at 72 today. And we will go through each one of these 2 times where we're going to go in for 1, out for 8. A couple bars of rest. I'll cue us in for 1, out for 8, and so on through the rest of the exercise. So let's check it out. I'm going to put some headphones on so I can hear the metronome. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, here comes 12 counts. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Cool, now when we go to 16 counts here, why don't we take a 2 count breath in? This is a relatively slow tempo, and I probably wouldn't normally take a 2 count breath in this situation, but just so we have a little more air so we can feel like everything is relaxed. So here we go with 16 counts, or excuse me, 2 counts in, 16 counts out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So ask yourself, when I got to the end of count 8, did I feel like I was kind of like at halfway? Did I kind of hold my air back for the first half? Did I blow too much on the first half? It's all about just that even, easy exhale over those set number of counts. Let's go 16 one more time with the 2 count breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Cool. Now that's a super classic breathing exercise. A couple things hopefully you noticed. My breaths were hopefully all seemed really relaxed. It probably didn't seem like I was doing a whole lot. I'm a big believer in what Emery Remington called a conversational breath, meaning that our breath should never be like a ton of effort. I think too often brass players think that every breath has to sort of be like the uber breath, where we're really like topping that tank all the way. And I would say we actually breathe differently in different situations. Now, it's always relaxed on the intake and the exhale, but the actual amount of air we take in might be different depending on the context, and it should never feel laborious. As soon as it feels like you're trying to take a good breath, you surely are not as effective with your breathing as we could be. So it's all about letting those body mechanics work naturally. Okay, for our second breathing exercise, we're going to go to the horn, kind of take a breathing exercise on the instrument this time. Now, if you're somebody who frequents my channel on YouTube or is part of the virtual studio, you're going to notice I'm playing on a little different instrument today. I'm kind of test playing a new horn here. And so this lesson, you might hear me make a few little response issues, a little intonation issues, just because this is a new instrument to me. I thought it'd be a good place to kind of put it through its paces, listen back a little bit when I go to edit this video to kind of see what I'm feeling about the sound. So I do apologize if there are any small little indiscretions of intonation or response. So for this breathing exercise, we are going to take a single note through a scale, just worrying about the attack. Now, we're not going to do breath attacks here. We are going to use our tongue, but what we're going to do is we are going to go up through our E flat major scale and then also our B flat scale in the upper octave just to work that range a little bit. And we're going to play a quarter note at the beginning of each measure and then have 3 counts of rest. And then we're going to breathe on beat 4, play the next quarter note, and so on and so forth. And what this is going to do is this is hopefully going to help us to think about what we would call the turnaround of the air. That intake to exhale. We want that to be as smooth as possible. We never want to have where we breathe in, we're holding back for a second, and then we release. We want it to be a circle. It's in, and then it's immediately out. There's never a holding back. And I know that a lot of players, when I see them playing in many situations, lead with standing, they have that, and then the sound. That holding back really affects our air and our sound in a relatively negative fashion. So we really want to make sure the turnaround of the air, is as smooth as possible. So again, I'm going to set the metronome quite slow. I'm going to go all the way at 55. So we have lots of time to exhale our air for some of those rests, take a nice fresh breath, and get that next attack. We're just going to play E flat major and then B flat major. We're just going to go up through these scales just for this exercise for time's sake. So let's check it out. The entire time I'm really just focusing on, am I breathing in all of count 4? And then as soon as I get to count 1, the air is right there ready for me to use to play and to start that note. Very little in between time where I'm inhaling to exhale. So let's try this on concert B flat now in our upper register just to work the range a little bit. All right, there are 2 what I consider really practical breathing exercises that are really pretty fundamental and nothing certainly out of the box as far as breathing stuff goes. Working on our breathing is something we all have to do. We'll maybe delve into that at a future lesson. All right, let's get into some things actually developing that range now that our breathing is hopefully at least working a little bit for today. For me, the most effective exercise in your upper range is one that almost all trombone players practice, and that is where we do some glisses moving upward from sixth position, where you're going to use a bunch of alternate positions, move through some of the higher partials, glissing in one note at a time. This is an absolute classic among trombone players, and that's because it really works. It focuses on the air flowing, it focuses on us really staying in the same partial the entire time and really feeling confident, even as the resistance is sort of changing as we're moving up and down the slide and the instrument is becoming longer and shorter, that with that consistent airflow and listening for these half steps moving up, that we can really hear and connect all these dots of air, face, ear, all this type of stuff. So let's check this out. We're going to go through a couple upper register partials. If this is not an exercise you've done before, make sure to have that handout in front of you. We're going to start going up to the high A flat in first. Now clearly that's going to be very out of tune. We're still going to work on the partial just in case that's where you need to be with your range. So what that's going to do, that's going to put us on an E flat in sixth position. So I would check your E flat. Just make sure you have that reference pitch and then find that note in sixth position and go through the exercise. I'm going to go a little bit out of time here and I'm going to hold each top note for just a moment to make sure I'm centered on the pitch and that it's very stable. Cool. Now, even like I said, that high flat is pretty out of tune. We're going to do it anyway because we do want to be able to play that G flat and G and all that kind of stuff in that partial. So I'm going to keep moving up to B flat, to C, to D, and so on and so forth, really focusing on keeping the air flowing even as I'm getting up higher on the horn. So let's check it out on our B flat partial. So our starting note is going to be an F. Then we're going to go up to C. Our starting note is going to be a G. Now, as you're going up, you might have this happen. Whereas you're getting to sort of like third, second, or first position, you sort of like jump down a partial suddenly. And that is just because the resistance of the horn is changing a lot as you're going up. And maybe your buzz, your air, is not all lined up like it needs to. You know, the kind of science behind what's going on in your instrument from a like sound physics perspective is relatively complicated. So as we're dramatically shortening this length of tubing, if our face is not like right there and our ear is not right there and our air is not right there, we're gonna maybe miss the partial. So it's not the end of the world. Just start again and move a little slower through those last couple of positions. Don't try to force the notes in those last couple of positions. Really listen and feel for resonance. You can't fight the instrument. You just have to feel where that slot is and allow the horn to vibrate there. Now, there is some work, you know, to strengthen your embouchure, to control your air, all this type of stuff. That's what we're doing right now. But if you feel like you're sort of fighting the instrument and like muscling the note in that register, you're never going to find the ease of playing there. So let's go up to our high D register, see if we can get all the way up there and get that happening. Now, that's going to start on an A natural. No, you heard me chip that note, that high A starting note when I was going up to the D. So I actually took a moment, kind of released my air, breathed out, took a fresh breath, and started again. So often in the upper register, I see students try to force it, and just like when they don't hit that note, they just try again, try again, try again. You got to stop, relax, make sure the air is flowing. That is the key to success in this register. All right, that's exercise number 1 for the upper register. The second thing we're going to do is going to key in on something we talked about in the lesson. This is going to both help build our range and build our consistency really across the entire register of the horn. In the lesson, we talked about doing what I like to call sing, buzz, play. Again, a relatively classic exercise. We're going to sing something with our voice, we're going to buzz it with our mouthpiece, and then we're going to play it on our instrument. To build the upper register in this way, we're going to use the last 5 notes of major scales as they ascend. So we're going to be going 5, 6, 7, 1, in a number of keys going up. This way we can really focus on something that is easy to hear, very easy to hear those last 5 notes of the major scale. And so that way we can kind of disconnect with the technical aspect of playing in the upper register. The more we can focus on hearing the upper register and connecting it with, kind of our air and the sounds coming out of our instrument versus like, hey, I've got to tighten up this, I've got to blow my air fast, any of that type of stuff. While some of those things may be true, we really don't want to think about that when we're performing. So if we can sort of, again, disconnect those two things and really just focus on the sound, that can help us. Let's start on our high A flat, and we're going to build up from there. Now, full disclosure, some of my buzzing in this range, it's going to sound a little tenuous. This is something I need to work on as well. I wouldn't say I'm somebody who has a really natural, great upper register. I'm some sort of virtuoso. I've just worked on it a lot over the years and have a dependable upper range that I can count on. But I'm certainly no Marshall Jilks or Conrad Herget or anything like that. And so I think that these approaches that I do work for a lot of players because, again, I don't necessarily have that natural facility that some players do. This is not to discount that those players surely practice this, but we all sort of have like different kind of base levels with the upper register as brass players. So here is our sing, buzz, play, starting on our high A flat. Now, if you're not so sure about if you're hearing the right pitch, that you're in the right key, check those notes maybe down the octave. So I'm going to play my last 4 notes of my A flat major scale down the octave. And then I'm going to sing that. Da, 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 da. Now, it's not about if I have a good voice or any of that kind of stuff. I actually don't enjoy singing. I never have. And I don't think I have a really great singing voice, but I can at least sing in tune and use that as a tool to improve at my musicianship. So again, our starting note is da. So then we're going to buzz that. Then finally, we go to the instrument and play. Ooh. Now, you noticed I was on the wrong pitch there with my voice and my buzz. Somewhere in there, I drifted down. And if that happens to you, it's no big deal. You could try to get on A flat to sing, buzz, play. I'm just going to go right to playing, and I'll correct myself in the next key we go to. Okay, let's see if I can be a little more accurate with my voice this time. Now we're going to go up to high B flat. We're going to move up in whole steps here, just to cover that ground a little more quickly. Let's get my reference notes. That's 5, 1. Now I'm going to sing. Da, 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 da. Then I'm going to buzz. Then finally we're going to play. Again, you could hear a little bit of an inaccuracy in there. So I need to slow down and actually try this to be a little bit more accurate on this next key. So now we're going to go to C major. So my reference pitches. G to C. Now that's starting to get relatively high for me. So I might sing this in a lower octave. Da, 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 da. Just to make sure I'm really in tune. But when I buzz it, I'm going to do it in the upper octave. Da. Then we go to the horn. Cool, so I was a little more accurate that time. You could also hear I really slowed down. That was not just for accuracy, that was also because this starts to get in the range where buzzing on the mouthpiece becomes challenging for me. And so I want to really slow down so I don't sort of overcorrect. I think that's what a lot of people do. They kind of force that buzz, and so the sound gets not so good, and it's harder to hit those high register notes. So let's see if I can get up to a high D. So now we're going to check our reference notes. A to D, and we're going to sing da, 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 da. And we're going to buzz in the upper register. Da, I'm going to check my note again. Ooh, let's try again. Then on the horn. Cool, so pretty accurately. At no point in there was I straining or working too hard. Even when I'm playing that high D natural, I don't want to feel like I'm working at like a 9 out of 10. The harder I have to work, the less consistent that's going to be. And so we really want to find ease of playing that register. Now, that's easy for me to say as a player who's been working at this for the last 20 years. If you're somebody who does not quite have that ease yet, focus on the range that you can play comfortably and really make sure that is just absolute nails. You can get a great sound in tune every time there and build up slowly from there. If you only have up to the high A flat, don't make the D the goal, make the B flat the goal, and then make the C the goal, and so on and so forth from there. All right, so that covers a bunch of range stuff. Again, that's not really our focus when we're playing lead trombone. It's just that a lot of times that's the challenge for people when we play lead trombone is developing good consistency, endurance, sound, intonation, that register. So we do need to work on it, but when it actually comes time to make music, that is the last thing we want to be focused on. So some of those other components that I talked about in the YouTube lesson that are important, let's start with your time. In that lesson, we sort of broke down how we can use the metronome in a couple different ways to really improve our time. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a simple sort of articulation pattern, and we're going to do exactly what we did in the lesson, where we break it down. We go just at quarter notes being the pulse, then half notes being the pulse, then a whole note being the pulse. So we only get 1 click per bar, and then even down to 1 click every 2 bars. We're going to try this through a couple different keys and just kind of see what we can put together on it. So our exercise is going to be this. All right, that's a pretty classic articulation pattern. We're going to move that through some different tempos that are going to roll out just like we did in the lesson. We're going to start at 160, then we'll cut that in half, which will take us to 80, cut that in half again, and that'll give us this sort of like decreasing metronome feel where we start to feel less and less of the metronome in order to help us. So let's check it out what it's going to feel like in 160 first. I'm going to play through each key, and we're going to leave a 1 bar rest after each key center. All right, here we go with 80. So half of that, so half notes. All right, cutting it in half again. Now here comes 40. Now we only have a click at the beginning of every bar. This is where it can start to become difficult to sense where the pulse is. So really make sure you're trying to keep that little rhythm section in your head going between these clicks that are very far apart from each other. and finally in half again to 20 beats a minute. Now this is going to be one click every 2 bars. So let's see if we can keep this together through these 3 different key centers. Now, you could hear in there, by no means was I perfect, especially on that last one. I tended to actually be, I think, a little early on some of those. So this is something we all need to work on. If you're feeling like it's too hard with a click every 2 bars, stick with a click every 1 and 3, or click on every downbeat of the measure, and then see if you can build up to having it every 2 bars. If the tempo is a little faster to start with, sort of our bass tempo, that can make it easier as well, because clearly those beats are not as far apart from each other and they're a little easier to sense. Okay, our final thing that we're going to do for today's practice session is work a little bit with some drones. Now, in the lesson, we played a scale with a drone, and we used a drone that has multiple pitches in it. Today, we're going to do a little bit of improvising with a drone. We're just freely going to improvise in sort of 3 different key centers, or kind of like modes, we would really say, kind of modal centers, really worrying about intonation. We're going to trade back and forth. I'm going to go for a little bit, and then you're going to go for a little bit. And what I would do is I would just try to maybe follow the sort of like general direction of what I was doing. I'm going to try to play each example a little different. We're going to do B flat major, then we're going to do D minor or D Dorian, and then we're going to do G dominant 7 or G mixolydian. For the first one, I'm going to use a drone that is just a single note, a B flat. And that is totally fine. You don't have to use a drone that has multiple notes in it. I like that because it gives you a few more notes to reference against, and it gets you the habit of listening to how you fit into a chord. So let's check out B flat major. I'm literally just going to stay in the B flat major, and this is going to be a real adventure for me because, as I said, the instrument I'm playing today is new to me. So you're probably going to hear a little bit of iffy intonation on my end. So let's give this a try. All right, here we go with our D minor example. So here I am going to put all 3 notes on. I think that gives us a more fuller dimension of like a drone to play against, and also is a little more realistic to how we actually listen in the ensemble. So here is D minor. We're really going to think about D Dorian here. That's sort of our main improvisatory form of minor, and that's what we're going to stick to here in a real modal sense. All right, and then finally, we've got G dominant 7. So this is really just going to be major, except we're going to have a flat 7. So I'm going to use that 3-note drone, and for all these, you could use a 3-note drone because none of them actually encounters a flat 9, a sharp 5, flat 5, any of that kind of stuff. All 3 of these key centers have just the root, the natural 5, and then the natural 9. So we can use that for all 3 of those. So here is G dominant 7th. All right, so surely you heard some intonation indiscretions in there from me. Even on my regular horn that I'd be playing on, you still would probably hear those. Playing in tune is hard. Anybody who tells you that they play in tune all the time or doesn't understand that intonation is sort of a lifelong battle probably plays out of tune a lot of the times and doesn't really realize it. It is something that you constantly have to be working on and refining. The better you get, the better your ears become. So the smaller and smaller intonation issues you start to hear more readily and quickly. So, it's always a chase with your technique, kind of chasing where your ears are and vice versa. All right, that's it for today's practice session. Hopefully some of this stuff today helps you to deal with your upper register, even though that's not really where we want to put our focus for this area of playing lead trombone, and then a couple other things in here to just help with consistency, time, all that type of good stuff. All right, we'll see you in the practice room.